So, quite recently, I've gotten into this independently made original cartoon. You may have heard about it. It's called Helluva Boss. Ever growing in popularity and status with a surprisingly wholesome fandom given its hell and demon premise. I only started watching the show in about September, but I have fallen in love with it quite a bit. And like with most cartoons I end up really enjoying, I started over watching it, discussing aspects of the show with my best friend who also happens to love it, watching theory and analysis videos, and I actually got my older brother hooked onto it too. This all to preamble to the fact that I had an interesting, epiphany of sorts, revolving around Stolas' death flags that just won't leave my brain. If you're watching this, I assume you already know the show and its characters, and probably know what I'm talking about already. But just in case, a death flag is just foreshadowing that a character is going to die. There are a lot of ways to do this, and Stolas is carrying around quite a few of them. I figured it out pretty quickly and early in my watching, and based on some of the other videos I've seen on YouTube, I'm not the only one. Heck, the very first episode properly featuring Stolas is episode 2. There he sings that amazing lullaby to Octavia. Though sweet, the song does have him saying that should he die, she'll be okay without him. An interesting sentiment from a thus far implied immortal, or at the very least not a very easily killable being. The very next episode featuring our favorite owl boy is the Harvest Moon Festival, where we learn that there is an assassin gunning for him. This episode is followed quickly by us learning that Via herself is a precautionary heir, as demanded by her grandfather, which becomes a little sus when Stolas' whole job given to him by his father is about finding prophecies, a job presumably done by Pyman himself beforehand. Stolas almost does die in Western Energy. Keep in mind, he was not saved from death by our favorite imp team, but by the fact that the hit itself was called off. Then lastly, we get some interesting imagery in the Oops episode, where Crimson's little death clock floats out and hits Stolas. I may come back to this, please keep it in mind. Pretty much every episode featuring Stolas has some kind of imagery of his eventual demise, even in the Look My Way video. Damn, Bryce can hit those emotional singing points. We see Stolas drowning. The imagery is intended to represent emotional drowning, but that is still death imagery. Now I've been waiting patiently to see if or when these death flags will actually be played on, because, despite everything, I have a hard time believing VivziePop and her team will actually kill off Stolas. They have done an amazing job to make quite the collection of likable characters, from the main 5, secondary characters like Via and Fizz, tertiary characters like Tex, Ferocica, and Barb, even villains and background characters. You can tell that the team loves this story and loves these characters, as do the fans. None of these characters are going to get killed off willy-nilly or without purpose, let alone a character as beloved and central as Stolas. And once again, I'm clearly not the only one who thinks so. I've seen some fan talks about the idea that Stolas' flags may actually be false flags, and that another character may end up being the recipient of the bullet with Stolas' name on it. Another character accidentally dying when the target was Stolas opens up a whole new avenue of rich storytelling. But who dies? At first this was just a background thought for me, until realization kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. First off, let's analyze this from a writing perspective. When dealing with character death, particularly well done or well written character death, you need to weigh characters' potential. How many interesting potential stories and interactions can come from a character being alive versus how many interesting potential stories and interactions can come from the character being gone, along with factoring in long-term storytelling and audience reaction. Some characters can be well-loved, popular, and have a lot of potential, but their death can have long-term ramifications that lead to amazing stories and character growth. That it all outweighs their potential otherwise. See Fullmetal Alchemist for proof. There is one character, however, in Helluva Boss whose death, specifically a death that is a side effect of an attempt on Stolas, that has the potential to butterfly effect itself into affecting every character we've ever met in Hell. It even has the potential of destabilizing the political and social structure of Hell as we've seen so far implied in the show. Now, to be clear, I do not want this character to die. This character is actually my favorite in the whole show. I don't really want any of them to die. I just realized that this one's death in particular would open up a very wide range of potential stories. And to properly articulate my point, I'm going to go through what I think would be the most likely outcomes of different characters dying, while keeping them mostly in character, and why each of their deaths would be a detrimental disservice to the future story flow of the show, with the exception of one. And I'll even start with Stolas. Let's say these aren't false flags. The most likely assassin to be coming for him is going to be Stryker. Stryker has slowly dipped into deranged territory, thanks to his different interactions with our main characters. If he ain't doing it for pay, he's doing it for himself at this point. So Stryker succeeds and ends Stolas. There are only two characters who are going to be genuinely affected by his demise, that being Blitz and Octavia. There are a lot of ways that this could actually impact these characters, but for Blitz, the most interesting thing I could think up for him is, yes, he'll get depressed. He may even go a little catatonic, but Blitz is not the type to take his feelings lying down. Like in the Beelzebub episode, he's likely to get faced, high or indulge in all over bad decision making, getting in and out of trouble, being a little too clingy to his friends, but ultimately his story would end up being one of the grieving process, and he has enough found family around him that he'll stabilize soon enough. Scarred for the rest of his life, but in the end he'll be okay. The hardest thing for Blitz is if this would happen before or after getting the Osmodeus crystal, and how it would affect his ability to reach the human world. From the Blitz-Stolas shipping angle, Stolas' death also feels a little too close to the fridge for my preference. Octavia has a bit more of an interesting angle should Stolas die, as now she would be under the full influence of her mother and uncle. Yes, she would be going through the grief process as well, but her story would end up being corralled into how easily or not she'd be corrupted by her remaining family. She may seek out Luna for comfort, and possibly Blitz as well, and we could get some very interesting and cute interactions there. But she is a royal and would now have a job to do, as she has now inherited Stolas' crown. She may also end up in a plot where she is now expected to produce a cautionary heir. An arranged marriage and having her own kid could lead to some very interesting interactions with her mother and her uncle, but that's about it. The only other angle I could see being interesting for her would maybe be her running away. Now, some may say, what about Stella? Wouldn't she have to deal with the repercussions of sending an assassin after a high-ranking Goetia? Well, no. It wasn't even a concern she had to begin with. The Goetias clearly see Stolas as some kind of outlier, a troublesome royal, if you will. Sure, there would be this silent understanding that Stella is ultimately the one who killed him, but Stryker would be given all the heat. It'd be something along the lines of, Stella didn't kill him, a deranged royal-hating peasant did. From the Goetia's view, it would be a pity, but ultimately better for them as they've gotten rid of a family embarrassment and replaced him with a much more trainable teen. These potential outcomes do not seem all that interesting when compared to the potential stories of Stolas staying alive, the back and forth with Blitz, him raising his daughter, his fights with his wife. Plus, all the stories told with him gone can still play out with him alive. Blitz can have a grief arc dealing with his mother. Stella may still try controlling Octavia with or without Stolas being in the picture. Even the idea of Octavia being in an arranged marriage plot could still be on the table. From a writing perspective, Stolas dying doesn't make any reasonable sense. So after him, the two I've seen propose taking the accidental shorthand for Stolas are, again, Blitz and Octavia. Now, if a stray bullet kills Octavia, there's really only one outcome. Stolas becomes a fully broken man. Stolas has lived his life for that girl, and I don't think having Blitz would be enough to counterbalance that. Via dying just becomes knife-twisting and leaves Stolas to becoming an empty shell of a man. I mean, he might get angry and violent towards Stella, but I just think he would fall apart. And ultimately, Blitz, IMP, and the other secondary and tertiary characters would go unaffected. So kind of, boo, bad ending. Blitz dying? Well, that's the end of the show. Blitz is the title character. He is the Helluva Boss. He has plot armor. And even if we did see the outcomes of his death, what is there? Stolas breaks, dealing with survivor's guilt, and goes back to the empty life that he had before, with the only happy thing in his life that he can live for being his daughter. Not too much of a difference for his story if Blitz was to outright reject him. Mox and Mill, they're good at their jobs. Really good. And they're a lot of fun and likable, but they don't seem like the types to keep IMP running. They're fun, but they lack the brand of charm that Blitz has to get clients. So Eminem would probably move on. Most likely becoming guns for hire and having to deal with Crimson at some point. But there's not much I can see them doing outside of that would be really interesting. Now, what about Luna? Feelings of the ultimate abandonment isn't a story plot I really want to see her go through. The most interesting outcome for her I could imagine is being taken in by Tex or B. Maybe she would be taken in by Stolas, but I don't think Luna would accept that one as much. She would just get the orphan learning to survive on her own story. The main group as a whole, it would just disband. Blitz dying? Again, kind of just knife twisting and just boo, bad ending. Blitz and Octavia are way more interesting and valuable to the story staying alive. Alright, so what about the rest of the main cast? Moxie and Millie dying kinda just end up the same way with one or the other in the driver's seat. Depression and/or a rage rampage. Stryker's dead, no doubt they would kill him. Then whoever survives is likely to just leave IMP permanently. Could get some sweet scene of Luna trying to have a comforting moment with whoever the survivor is, but she would ultimately be unaffected outside of a general feeling of loss and having to deal with any kind of crap Blitz is giving her. Blitz would lash out and/or become a little too clingy to whoever survived. He might make a pass at whoever the widower is, but I kind of doubt he would in this scenario. And besides, I think Blitz would eventually seek out comfort from Stolas. It might be the pushing point for him and Stolas to just get together permanently. The most interesting idea I could come up with the outcome of one of the M&Ms dying would be whoever survives having a reign of terror. They would most likely take over one of the factions of imps, be it Mafia Town or the Ring of Wrath. They would just leave a trail of bodies and blood in a fury of blind rage and pain. After they've calmed down from that, you can insert another grief plot, and it might lead to the survivor finally getting back on the dating scene. These are the most logical and interesting outcomes I could think of without getting the characters too far off. Maybe more out there, but outside of the rise to power plot, I don't think fans would respond very well to the M&Ms dying and watching the pain and struggle of the surviving widow. And again, the idea of Moxie or Millie taking over the Mafia family can happen just as easily with both of them being alive. Losing Luna is similar to losing Octavia. It would be a loss of a story just starting. Blitz would no doubt fall apart and never be the same again. But he's already dealt with the loss of family before, and is the right kind of broken to find meaning and comfort in the members of his found family. There's a good chance that he may lash out at Stolas and blame him for Luna's death, in which case we have a broken up for good Stolas and Blitz. Not much to say that hasn't already been said there. Though Blitz may also have the opposite reaction and cling to Stolas harder, and as a result of that, he might find a bittersweet connection with Octavia. Unfortunately, I don't think Luna has made a strong enough friendship with Tex, B, or any of the other Hellhounds to have a truly long-term effect on them, meaning Luna dying would just have us lose a fan favorite and start a grief arc. Her coming into her own and actually making friends and family is way more interesting than seeing a sad Blitz. The death of any of the 5 main characters or Octavia would most likely be detrimental to the overall story flow of the show. It wouldn't go over well with fans, and though the writing team of the show is very good at invoking genuine emotions, these characters dying would very easily come off as manipulative, contrived, or just knife-twisty. It would become a, they're dead, I cried, now what scenario. So now what? Most of the characters who are left are either background characters or villain characters whose loss on the show would be more or less non-impactful, or it might even be a celebrated demise. Other options being characters who are way too important to the world at large, and their death would be more confusing than interesting. So you may be wondering who I was talking about before, or you've already realized that there is a fan favorite character who I have only directly mentioned once so far. The character whose death has the potential to butterfly effect itself into affecting every character and destabilizing hell as we know it? Well...
I am the one and only Fizzerati. Some of you might recognize this dashing clown face from my numerous toy project replicas across the rings of hell.
Alright, now hear me out on why I think Fizz taking the hit for Stolas could spiral all of hell out of whack. Right away, there would be three and a half ways that this would butterfly affect itself into changing every aspect of the show so far, and even potentially getting the attention of characters from its parent show. Continuing with the premise that it would be Stryker to be the one holding the gun at Stolas, struggles ensue, the main imps save Stolas, capture or kill Stryker, but one stray shot goes off in the middle of everything, ending Fizzerali. Setting the obvious aside, let's take a look at Blitz and Stolas' reaction. Both of these two are the types to already be prone to guilt. So now you're looking at survivor's guilt, and Blitz and Fizzy's past relationship cannot be ignored. Fizz was implied to be Blitz's first love, a brother in the craft, childhood best friend, and one of the only connections to his past even remotely willing to reconnect. It's one thing when someone you care about and angry with isn't in your life anymore. It's a completely another when they're gone, and I mean gone. This can make Blitz more than reject Stolas. He may unfairly blame Stolas, lashing out in a cruel way, which I'll get into more when talking about Blitz. Stolas losing Blitz in such a finite, angry way, paired with survivor's guilt, and it all ultimately being Stella's and thusly Stolas' fault? Stolas is likely to respond in one of three ways. 1. He could go catatonic. He would just make it to an emotional breaking point he's not equipped to handle. This would affect Via in a similar way as if Stolas was dead. Her mother and uncle would have easy access to her to be able to manipulate her. The second option is that Stolas could go completely robotic, living life as a shell, just doing what is expected, going by day. And then there is 3, and the most interesting possible outcome: anger, rage, and hate. His self-control and gentle nature finally being broken. His life is a mess. Blitz would be a mess, lashing out in the worst ways possible, and it's all unfairly placed on Stolas' shoulders. Why play nice anymore? Stolas is terrifying when he wants or needs to be, and he is a prince of hell. There is a truly terrifying side to him. This new Stolas could happen suddenly or slowly but surely build, with all the pressure he's been under for years finally boiling over. Ain't gonna sugarcoat it. This Stolas may be more than willing to let Stella being on the receiving end of a toxic relationship, if he doesn't kill her outright. The abuse or death of Stella would push Via away from him, even if the rage and anger isn't directed at her herself. Octavia, watching the loving father she knew, who used to be so approachable to her, becoming a living hell beast, she would have no choice but to back away from him. This new Stolas may not be something the Goetia family knows how to handle either. If he becomes openly hostile to Stella or kills her, this might create an internal war amongst the Goetia ranks. Stolas wouldn't have the same excuses that she had when it comes to attacking or killing his spouse. Stella, for better or worse, fit in with the Goetias. Such schism in the ranks could bring them into internal warfare. Stolas' own parents could get called into the picture. We have room for stories to arise organically that center around Stolas' birth, how he grew up, what his marriage to Stella was like in the early years. We can also get stories of what it was like when Stella was a kid, stories of when Octavia was a kid. Then there's also the possibility that the new aggressive Stolas is a man Stella is attracted to. Stolas, in a very broken and messed up way, might actually allow for it. A messed up relationship with his former abuser now being on the receiving end and her liking it. Now let's look at Blitz and his tidal wave of a ripple effect. Now, in none of the other scenarios I've proposed have I suggested that Blitz would lash out at Stolas in an overly aggressive or hostile way when blaming him. The only one being close would be if he blamed Stolas for Luna dying. The biggest difference being that this is Fizzarali. Fizz, one way or another, has been an emotional center for Blitz his whole life, and a symbol for his past as a whole. They were friends. He fell in love. He has massive guilt and complicated feelings from not only blowing Fizz up, but everything else that happened that night. The death of his mother, the downward spiral and eventual drug addiction of his sister, most likely being disowned by his father, and the closing of the circus. Fizz going down from a shot aimed at Stolas would hit Blitz hard. Blitz would blame Stolas. Blitz would blame himself. He realistically has pre-existing survivor's guilt from the original fire, now paired with the idea of why did Fizz get shot and not himself. This is why his response to Stolas would be more than aggressive. It would be borderline sadistic. Every negative thought and emotion Blitz has is now boiling to the surface, with himself and Stolas being at the top of the recipients list. As said before, Blitz isn't the type to take his feelings laying down. Blitz would go down a path of self-destruction. More than likely, Blitz would seek out his sister again, wanting to talk to her, reminisce with her, reconnect, simply let her know firsthand, lest we forget Barb grew up with Fizz just as well. Or he's hitting her up to get high. Maybe she agrees to see Blitz, maybe she doesn't. Either way, it's a path that Blitz might get her hooked on stuff again. As I get the feeling she wasn't the only one of the siblings who ever needed to go rehab at one point or another. Trying to get himself fucked up might be the temptation that makes her re-spiral. And this Blitz is a very emotional Blitz. His first love is dead. He has officially pushed Stolas away and is having old inferiority resurface. He, brokenhearted, angry, lonely, and probably high, there's a good chance he hits up Verosika. Now, Verosika loved Blitz. From her introduction, she doesn't give off angry, crazy ex vibes. She gives off jaded and broken heart vibes. And Blitz knows this. He knows she truly cared for him at one point. In this proposed state, he may be pathetic enough or able to say the right things to make her take him back. And I get the feeling that even when it was at its best, they probably didn't have a very good relationship. With that said, even if Blitz hooked up with Verosika, I think Stolas and Blitz would still end up being on occasion. It's no longer the result or build-up to thinly veiled love. It's hate-fucking. Self-loathing for the broken men they've become as they desperately try to cling onto what is left from the small singular moments that they ever felt truly happy. while only having it remind them that time and time again they are moving further and further away from the people that allowed the other to fall in love with him in the first place. Blitz might even revisit the location where the fire happened and reach out to his dad Cash if he's still alive. Now, with Blitz going down in a blaze of self-hatred, there are 3 more main characters who are going to get hit by it. Blitz is important to Moxie and Millie. Let's not forget that Moxie and Blitz met before Moxie and Millie did, meaning Blitz may be the reason these 2 lovebirds ever met. They're going to try and help Blitz. Somehow. They might try defending his crazy antics, calling him out for his trying to comfort him or getting him to talk. There are so many ways they would want to help him, but here's the deal. Mox and Mill have always responded to Blitz differently, and I don't think this would be any different. I do not see these 2 being on the same page on how to stop Blitz from destroying himself. And this could honestly cause Hell's biggest love doves to break apart. It starts with small disagreements, to subtle jabs, to full arguments and hurtful comments. It's not too similar from a set of parents slowly breaking apart because they can't agree on how to help their child who's passing. And while they feel like they're falling apart, we, the audience, can see stories and flashbacks of how they used to be, how they met, how they fell in love, and what their wedding was like. Then there is Luna. Similar to Octavia, her dad is slowly becoming distant and closed off to her. Blitz would probably not purposely do or say anything cruel to her, but little things would pop up. A slip of a tongue, not answering the phone, forgetting to go to something important to her. Or him becoming mostly absent, either physically or emotionally, by being perpetually smashed. As he's wallowing in his own pain, not realizing those around him are also in pain. Luna would most likely revert to being aggressive and heartbroken. But at least this time, she can find comfort in friends like Tex and Octavia. Via and Luna could bond greatly over this time, seeking a sisterly love from each other as they help protect each other from the pain their dads are in. The 2 may even end up pseudo-living with Tex, Bee, or a group of hellhounds just to get away from everything. And yes, Tex would be affected by the fallout. His boss is Verosica. If she indulges in bad vices and even danger due to Blitz, he's going to be affected by that. Not to mention Bee is his girlfriend. She would no doubt be dealing with different side effects of the fallout that I'll get into later. But again, we can be treated with stories and flashbacks of Luna's childhood, her adoption, her birth parents, how Tex and Bee met, and much, much more. And these are just the butterfly effects of Blitz and Stolas reacting to Fizz potentially dying. Again, still not talking about the obvious one yet. The next wave would be Fizzeroli's fan base. Fizz is popular and famous across all rings of hell. The only ring he might not be the top celebrity in being Pride, as they may have their own celebrity faction. Yes, part of his popularity is due to being Mama's little icon, but he is a performer, and at the end of the day, Fizz is a kind person and a very gentle soul. Even with dealing with fans that he may not be in the mood to talk to, or talking with rivals, he shows respect and kindness. His fans love him for a large amount of reasons, so him dying will cause unrest. Look at when major public icons die in real life. Places close, people do stupid and irrational things in their grief. Plus, in this scenario, the way Fizz dies could cause a lot of rumors and unrest. A pretty close comparison in real life would be Princess Diana. She married into a royal family from a lower station. She was the people's princess and well beloved by more than just the people of Britain. She was loved in many countries. It's said that other members of the royal families weren't as thrilled about her as the people. When she died, it was a tragedy. Still to this day, there are heated arguments about if her passing was truly an accident or not. Fizz is a low-class imp, a maimed imp at that worked his way up to fame and fortune, becoming a beloved icon to the people. Developing close relationships with some of the highest-ranking members of society, eventually ended up in a loyal, now public romantic relationship with a Sin. Then he gets accidentally shot by an imp supremacist who was hired by a Goetia to kill another Goetia right after publicly quitting Mammon.
Little sus, babe.
This will cause rumor. This will cause talk. Even if the people accept it as a genuine accident, it could still very well lead to the beginning of class and race warfare within the rings, turning Fizzeroli into a symbol or a martyr. And now for the third wave of effects and the most obvious one, Asmodeus. Firstly, keep in mind, Asmodeus is more than just in love with Fizz. They inspire each other. They are dedicated. There's also this very subtle implication that this may be the first time Ozzy has been in love, or the first time in a very long time he's been in love, given his public stance on the matter altogether. That and the public seems to be way more sympathetic to Ozzy rather than be celebrating Fizz. So Asmodeus has 3 potential responses to Fizz's death, similar to Stolas being rejected. He could go into a depressed catatonic state, he could go into a robotic state of just going through the motions day by day, or he could go full rage hellbeast mode, each one having uncertain ramifications. As of yet, we don't really know the full extension of what each of the Sin's jobs are. Yes, they rule their rings, yes, they have power, run businesses, and throw parties, but what their full roles is unknown to us as the audience. How and how much they interact with each other, the human world, sinners, even their own subjects is a little unclear. A sin going into shutdown mode due to grief and depression would not be good no matter what. A realm without a ruler is just trouble. A sin going through the motions, equally not good. A sin becoming a rampaging monster, very not good. Combination of all three of these becomes interesting. Would the other sins like B come to help comfort him? Would they have to fight him or take him down? With this line of storytelling, we could see the dynamic between the sins themselves. We could get stories of the sins past and how or if they interact with sinners and humans, what it means to be one of the rulers of hell. We might also get hints of what it was like when hell was first created, how the Hellborns came to be. We can also get Asmodeus talking about how he and Fizz got together, filling in more context of what happened to Fizz after he got blown up, what it was like for him working the early years of Mammon, and how Oz and Fizz came to truly trust and love each other. And with one of the sins out of commission and the other sins distracted trying to take care of him, it creates a complete power vacuum. Hellborns like Crimson would no doubt try to take advantage of the chaos. And to add flames to the Imp fire, I really don't think Fizzy's fans would react favorably to Mammon attempting to use Fizzy's image once he's gone. Imagine it for a moment. The Imps are riled up, calling for social change, while the Goetia are preoccupied with an internal conflict. The sins are dealing with either a depressed or angry sin. Hell as we know it is falling apart. This might actually require the intervention of Lucy himself, or get the curiosity of Charlie. Now, I'm not saying any of this is going to happen. Like I said, Fizzarali is my favorite character. I'd rather get more cute and relatable stories of these two idiots being in love, and maybe help guide these two idiots in actually talking. But in a show that does have death flags, there is only one character whose death would open up so many doors to dramatic and interesting stories. And I'm not even done, as there are still more lines of thinking. There are what-if extensions. What if Stryker gets away? We now have revenge and hunting him down plots, or him riling up the masses for imp supremacy. What if Fizz didn't die or doesn't die right away? What if he goes into a coma? What if some entity allows everyone to think Fizz is dead when he's not? What if and can Fizz be resurrected? This universe's hell has advanced technology and magic. Concepts of cloning and resurrection are not off the table. Also, angel weapons are intended to kill sinners and royals. Maybe they affect Hellborns differently? Maybe not. We can also get recovery plots. Not only can we watch as these characters go down paths of self-destruction, but climbing their way back to a place of happiness. Putting their pieces back together, but forever changed by knowing just how far each of them can go. So yeah, if Stolas' death flags are actually meant for someone else, my conclusion would be Fizzarali. And in making this video, I found two very interesting things. The scenario I propose has Stryker being the one firing the killing shot. In Oops, Stryker has Fizz at his mercy twice, and both times the show treats it like a genuine threat. And then there's the death clock itself. It's intended for Fizz, but then it hits Stolas, making a symbolic connection between these characters and to death.